Hi, I'm Serith. I did another video in which I presented books on ritual theory. I'll be doing another one of those sooner or later, but for now I'd like to do one on books that give examples of actual ritual practice. If you look through the ritual theory books, you'll find a lot of ritual practice in them because they need to give examples of what they're talking about. But these ones that I'm going to talk about today specifically focus on the actual rituals. You can use these to inspire your own theories about ritual and decide how to write your rituals. Some of them you can steal from, although I'm not really recommending that unless they're from a tradition that you're working in currently, because a ritual includes assumptions from its culture that might not translate very well. But still, they can give you inspiration, tell you what sort of things you need to do in your ritual. I'm going to start with Japan and then work my way west. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the tea ceremony. Oh, by the way, in the description section I'll have the names and authors of all of these books. So this one is the tea ceremony. The tea ceremony is a very interesting ritual because it's you can call it a secular ritual. It's not directed towards a deity or to deities, not really dedicated towards any sort of divine reality like the Tao, for instance. It's intended to be human-oriented and nature-oriented, to teach you how to do something perfectly naturally and perfectly clearly, perfectly simply. It could be a very useful thing, at least studying it could be a very useful thing to help in your own rituals in the sense of doing things gracefully and more beautifully. Both things that I really recommend for rituals. This one here is called Sherpas Through Their Rituals by Sherry Ortner. The Sherpas are probably pretty well known as a group of people that live in the Himalayas and often serve as guides for mountain climbers. In fact, the Sherpa Tenzing Norgay was one of the first two people to the top of Mount Everest. What's interesting about them is that they're both Buddhist and pagan, animist, whatever you want to call it. The Bo religion, I think, is what it's called in Tibet, and it's a similar religion. So what they've had to do is combine those two practices. Some cases they actually combine them in one ritual. Sometimes they have just the native religion. Sometimes they have just Buddhism. So it's an interesting area to study for syncretism. If you're looking out there to combine various religious practices of your own, then it's a good place to start to figure out how that can be done, or at least how it's done in a currently existing culture. This book here, Taoist Ritual in Chinese Society and History by John Lagerway. What you probably know about Taoism is what you read in the Tao Te Ching. That's what's called philosophical Taoism. This is an example of ritual Taoism, which is more directed towards things like long life or prosperity. The rituals are very complicated. That's one of the things that fascinates me about this book. There are, for instance, certain steps you have to make. Like your ritual area is divided into sub-areas, and as part of the ritual you travel from one section of it to another. There's also differences of dress, including things that you do during the ritual, changing hats, for instance. It's just very complicated and very beautiful, but it's a good way to show to yourself just how complicated ancient ritual actually is. We tend to think of pagan ritual, Taoist is close, as being very simple, but it wasn't at all, and this will show you. Another thing they'll show you is this one. This is the text of the White Yajurveda, or Vājasaneyā-Saṃhita. It's the Yajurveda, which is one of the four Vedas in India. This book consists of the mantras that were recited at various points during the ritual. What's interesting about this particular edition, it's been translated, I think it's by Griffith. Yes, by Ralph Griffith. What's interesting about this edition is it includes footnotes that describe the ritual that these actual mantras go in. So by reading this, you can get a good idea of the basic rituals, particularly the Soma ritual of India, and then you can look up and see what words were spoken at any given point. So it's a pretty good introduction to Vedic ritual. This one here is a printout You can actually find this online. I'll give a link to it in the description. You can also buy it. I bought it, made a photocopied version of it. It's called The Rites of the Twice Born by Mrs. Sinclair Stevenson, which shows you how long ago it was written. They don't even give her first name here. It was published in 1920. It's still a good book. It includes things like marriages and funerals, the sort of things that you don't find in the other books on Vedic stuff, which tend to concentrate on the summer rituals. So these are more the everyday things, the popular ones. There's another one, another printout. It's called The Religious Ceremonies and Customs of the Parsis. It's online. I'll have a link to it in the description. It's at avesta.org, which has all of the Zoroastrian scriptures and a whole bunch of other books on the subject. Fantastic website if you're at all interested in Zoroastrianism, Iranian religion. It describes most of the more important of the Zoroastrian rituals. It's a little confusing because he doesn't arrange it in an order that you you'd sit down and work through the ritual. It has like subparts and reflections of them later on, things like that. But with a little worrying, you can figure it out. It's the best book out there on Zoroastrian rituals. Zoroastrian rituals are very beautiful. A lot of them continue pre-Zoroastrian Iranian paganism. So if you're interested in Indo-Iranian paganism, it's probably the best out there. I believe that some of them are also incredibly archaic and are probably the closest to proto-indo-european religion, proto-indo-european rituals that are the other ones that are practiced today or that we actually have records of. So if you're interested in proto-indo-european religion, this is also a really good book to read. Okay, going to the Americas. Sacred Pipe, Black Elk's Accounts of the Seven Rites of the Oglala Sioux. This is exactly what it says. It's by Black Elk, and it's his descriptions or art descriptions from his descriptions of the various rituals, the sweat lodge, the sun dance, crying for a vision, things like that. It's pretty much written as descriptions of them. You might also want to read at the same time Lame Deer Seeker Revisions, The Life of a Sioux Medicine Man by John Lame Deer. This is what it says. It's a biography, an autobiography actually, by Lame Deer, who was a Lakota, I think it was Lakota, a Sioux medicine man. As part of it, he describes a number of rituals, including a lot of the ones that are mentioned in the Sacred Pipe. He describes in pretty good depth, which adds a nice comparison to Black Elk, but he also gives explanations of them and feelings as to what it would be like to actually celebrate them. So you get a good feel of what the rituals are like from the inside. So if you're interested in Sioux rituals, these two books together are highly recommended. Yep, looks like I skipped a place. The Year in Ireland, Irish Calendar Customs by Kevin Danaher. These are folk customs connected mostly, well, primarily through to the calendar. For Breed's Day, for New Year's Day, for various saints' days, that sort of a thing. It's folk customs. Those of you who are interested in Celtic Reconstructionism might find them interesting, although you do have to remember that Christians are perfectly capable of creating their own rituals. So whether any of these go back to pagan days or not is open to question. I guess that most of them don't actually. But still, they're good examples of how a Celtic ritual would work, at least in a Christian context. If you want to do some sort of Celtic paganism that isn't so much Reconstructionism, but based on folklore, this is the book you definitely want. Okay, now let's move to ceremonial magic and modern paganism. This is a lovely book, Gems from the Equinox, edited by Israel Regardi. It's writings by Aleister Crowley. It's excerpts from his journal, The Equinox. I believe The Equinox is actually online. I'll try to dig it up, and if I find it, I'll put it in the description. There are also links to various articles in here that are also online. I'll give a link to a place that contains a lot of them as well. There are a lot of rituals in here. There are also a lot of commentaries and theology, background material. It's currently in print by Weiser. This is the version of it that first came out by Llewellyn back in the 80s. No, 70s actually. Very beautiful edition. I think the current edition is in paperback. So I got the fancy version, hardcover with silver and everything. If you want to study ceremonial magic, this is probably vital. If you want to study Aleister Crowley, it's definitely vital. This is a book of pagan rituals. In this particular edition, it doesn't credit it to anybody, but they were written by Herman Slater. This was back from the 70s, I believe. At least that's when I bought it. And it's fairly basic, fairly eclectic rituals, a slight Wiccan tint to it. Very simple ones. It's sort of been ignored in recent years, but I recommend it pretty highly. I practiced a fair number of these rituals myself in my early days of Wicca before I started writing my own, and I was inspired by them as well. Some of the words in here you'll actually find in modern Wicca and without attribution, so you should read this just so you know where those things are coming from. This one, Circles, Groves, and Sanctuaries, Sacred Spaces of Today's Pagans by Dan and Pauline Campanelli. It's pictures and descriptions of altars, circles, sanctuaries, things like that, of modern pagans. Sacred space is an important part of ritual, so this can be useful. There actually are some rituals for setting up the sacred spaces and praying with them, protecting rituals in front of them, that sort of a thing. Very nice book, very beautiful pictures in here. I especially like the shrine that's on 52 and 53. So if you're interested in modern paganism, and particularly sacred space and shrines and sacred images and things, this is the book for you. It's by Llewellyn. I'm not a big fan of Llewellyn, but this one, they got it right. I wouldn't be a very good author if I didn't recommend my own books. These two, A Book of Pagan Prayer and A Pagan Ritual Prayer Book, as they say, contain lots of prayers. They also contain prayer theory. Why do we pray? What's the basic structure of a prayer? How do you write prayers? That sort of a thing. So for both examples and for help in writing your own prayers, these are books you want. They're a beautiful size. I had no input on this thing, but there's a beautiful size, nice cover, got the little curved edges so you can carry them in your pocket or your purse or your briefcase and just use them like at a wedding or something like that. Use them like an actual official prayer book. Whoever came up with that design was brilliant. I wish I knew who they were so I could thank them personally. Deep Ancestors, Practicing the Religion of the Proto-Indo-Europeans. As it says, this is about Proto-Indo-European religion. A lot of rituals in it for holidays, basic sacrifice, sacred space, things like that. There are excerpts from this on my website, which have been edited since I wrote the book. I'll give a link to my website in the description. Finally, Back to the Beginnings, Reinventing Wicca. This one I love. It's one of my favorite books of my own. I consider it to include some of my best ritual work. The basic idea was that Gerald Gardner invented Wicca using the best scholarship of his day. So what would have happened if he lived today and used the best scholarship of today? So this took a lot of rummaging through academic journals and academic books and all that sort of thing to find out what we knew, particularly about the Celts and the Saxons, but about what we didn't know about areas that we didn't know enough about from them. I looked into other Indo-European cultures like the Romans, the Greeks, and the Vedics, and as a result of which I invented my own form of Wicca. There are excerpts from this on my website. There are also prayers, by the way, on my website, some of which are in these prayer books if you want to see what sort of prayers I write. You could also look at the other videos that I have on YouTube. There are a fair number of YouTube videos about ritual, actually containing rituals, including ritual songs. One more thing about my website is there actually is a sub-page on ritual, including one section on ritual theory and then one section on rituals themselves, which include rituals that I've written for the years. These are just a small number of books that contain rituals. Most books on modern Wicca include rituals. In fact, some of them, that's really all they include. Almost all books about Vedic subjects include rituals and so on. So you can carry on from the books that I've shown here, but these are ones that are really good for starting. So that's my video for today. If you have any questions, just put them in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe and to thumb me up if you like what I do. Check out the rest of my videos and have a good time. Thank you. Bye.